Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I think this 1 year has shown that self-reliance is no longer an option. This is something we need to double down on. And in this context, I'd just like to begin by referring to a Latin phrase, si vis pacem para bellum. If you want peace, you must prepare for war. And that's not just true in terms of guarding our borders. It is true in terms of our economic security, energy security, and resilience of our supply chains, as we've seen with semiconductors over the last few years, and as we're now seeing with rare earth minerals. As far as our defense spending is concerned, it is 1.9% of our GDP. And defense experts time and again have said that this should at least increase to 2.5%. The industry says it should increase to 3%. Let me begin by asking about Operation Sindoor. And General Naravne, you're possibly the best person to throw some light on it. India emerged successful in that conflict with Pakistan, a short duration conflict that we saw. But what were some of the gaps that you feel it is very necessary for us to plug for the future? And what's the opportunity for the industry there?
Good evening, everyone, and Jai Hind. And thank you, CNBC TV 18, for this opportunity to speak to all of y'all. And I must tell you, Parikshit, that you have taken one quote away from me, that if you want peace, prepare for war. That's one of my favorite quotes, which was said in the 5th century AD.
So I'm sure you have many, many more stories which are much
Roman
better.
Scholar. But getting back to what you just asked about Op Sindoor, Op Sindoor has been a very big inflection point as far as our nation's policy is concerned. It has demonstrated to the world that not only do we have the political will, but also the military capability to carry out whatever actions or operations are required for us. And I think that is one of the most significant outcomes of Operation Sindoor. That apart, we have, through Operation Sindoor, also made a very clear statement that we will not differentiate between terrorists and those who sponsor terrorism. For us, both are in the same plane, and all such actors will be targeted, whether state or non-state. So these are some very important takeaways out of Operation Sindoor. Of course, with every operation, and I will not say that it is only particular to the military, but to all businesses, you always learn lessons as you go along. And we too would have learnt our lessons from Operation Sindoor. What are the gaps, especially in the field of intelligence acquisition and drone warfare, what we need to do to counter this new threat of unmanned systems, whether at land, sea, or air. So these are ongoing processes, lessons learned, and how to mitigate them. And I'm sure that these are being looked into with all the seriousness that they deserve and will be acted upon. I do not want to intentionally, I am not committing to any particular weakness or lesson learned, because I don't want to give away what those could be and which could be taken advantage of our adversaries in the future.
But it's quite given, sir, that we have to prepare for new age warfare in the future.
That's true, because every conflict is fought in a new dimension. And armies are often accused of fighting the last war. But that is because that is the only experience we have. We don't know how the future of warfare is going to evolve. We can only crystal gaze and prepare for likely scenarios. But what actually happens is quite different from what we have prepared for.
Right. And you know, General Naravne, as we were talking earlier, when soldiers fight a war, ladies and gentlemen, it's when everything has broken down, when diplomacy is not working, politics have failed, and economic security is also at threat. So when soldiers fight, it's finally the last resort. Ambassador Swaroop, if I can bring you in at this stage, how has Operation Sindoor really changed our relationship with the United States? It ended with Donald Trump saying he's the one who brought the war to a halt. And since then, we've had it very difficult in terms of securing a trade deal. The tariffs on India are at 50%. We've not been able to strike a deal. How have things changed between India and the United States?
Thank you, Parikshit and CNBC TV 18 for inviting me to this global summit. It's a pleasure to share some thoughts with you and to share the stage with General Naravne. So Operation Sindoor, as General Naravne said, marked truly an inflection point in our strategic doctrine because it showed that henceforth, cross-border terrorism from Pakistan will not be responded to with dossiers or notes of diplomatic protest, but with visible and proportionate force. And that obviously, has had its own dynamic. As you know, this was a 4-day war that was brought to a close when the DGMO of Pakistan called our DGMO and said, we want to call a stop, we want to stop hostilities. We said, we were already clear from day one that if you don't respond, we will not respond. Our job was to take out the terror sanctuaries, and we did that. And beyond that, we had no business to escalate this. Now, Donald Trump injected himself into this. He said it was thanks to his efforts that India and Pakistan stepped back from a nuclear confrontation and this war was brought to a halt. We, of course, completely rejected that because, our stated position right through has always been we will not accept any external mediation as far as India-Pakistan relations are concerned. So this has obviously miffed President Trump. So that's the first thing, because contrast our approach with that of Pakistan. We said Donald Trump had nothing to do with the ceasefire, which was directly negotiated between the two DGMOs. Pakistan not only acknowledged Donald Trump's role, but even nominated him for a Nobel Peace Prize. So that's the first point because of which Donald Trump is miffed. The second reason for Donald Trump being unhappy with India is our membership of blocs like SCO and BRICS. BRICS in particular, I think he has a bee in his bonnet about BRICS. Somebody has whispered to him that this is an anti-Western alliance which wants to create an alternative currency to the dollar. So that's the second point. But thirdly, and I think most importantly, Parikshit, Donald Trump is miffed because the ultimate deal maker could not get India to sign on the dotted line on a one-sided trade deal. He wanted us to open up completely our agriculture and dairy, give up our data localization rules. We said, just for the sake of a photo op trade deal, we are not going to do that. And that's why today, India is one of the only countries which still does not have a trade deal.
Right. Ambassador Swaroop, I know it's been some time since you retired as a diplomat, but within the diplomatic fraternity, what's the sense? Why is this deal taking time? Will it happen this year? Because we've already reached the fall deadline.
So you see, first of all, we have to analyze a deeper strategic reason. And the fact of the matter is, India no longer has the same strategic salience in Washington that was there pre-Trump. Because every US president, starting from George W. Bush, has seen India as essential to maintaining a global balance of power favorable to American interests. They saw India as the only democratic counterweight to a rising and increasingly assertive China. And that's why they were invested in the rise of India. Now, Trump does not look at India from that lens. As you know, he wants a G2. He wants to do a deal with China. He's already done at least a one-year deal with China, that they will continue to get rare earths and America will not impose sanctions. So because Trump does not look at India from a strategic point of view, but simply as a market for American agriculture, as a market for American energy, for American technology, for American defense sales. And that's why, he's putting maximum pressure on us. The 50% tariff, including 25% on buying Russian oil, is all intended to pressurize us into accepting a one-sided trade deal, which we have clearly said we will not accept.
Right. Ladies and gentlemen, some trivia. Ambassador Swaroop had addressed the press conference with the then DGMO post India's Uri operation.
That's right.
So that was a very iconic press conference that had been called, where Ambassador Swaroop and the DGMO had announced what had happened. And General Naravne, ladies and gentlemen, was at the helm of affairs. He was the army chief during COVID-19 when the Galwan incident took place. And so that brings me to China. We lost 20 of our soldiers during Galwan. Chinese lost 5, according to what they admitted. Real numbers possibly could be much higher. Fast forward to this year. During Operation Sindoor, China was helping Pakistan real time with intelligence inputs, and there were Chinese planes, cargo planes landing in Pakistan. In such circumstances, can there really be a reset with China?
Well, the fact that Pakistan and China have had very good relations is not anything new. And this is something that we have always factored into our calculations, both at the political, diplomatic, and military level. And this partnership between them is likely to continue in the foreseeable future. But we should not always see everything as a zero-sum game. In fact, the US and China have also signed a deal recently. Just 2 days after India and US signed a 10-year defense partnership. So people are partnering with whoever they feel they should in their national interest. And therefore, we should not totally shut the door on anyone and keep looking at opportunities in various fields. And relations between countries cover a vast gamut of activities. It's not only defense, it is defense, trade, people-to-people contacts. So we must explore where we can do what's best for ourselves in our national interest and not go by instructions being given by somebody that you do this or you don't do that. And that is what I think is the bottom line as far as India is concerned. And to that extent, I think even China has now realized that a military option to achieve their aims is no longer possible. We have crossed that stage. We are a military power to be reckoned with, at least in the South Asian region. So they too are cognizant of that fact and would like to move beyond this just a military lens to our relations and exploit the other opportunities that they have in India, especially in the trade and commerce, again, for their interests. So it's all a mutually beneficial kind of activity, which will always happen.
Right. General Naravne, now, when we speak about long-term challenges, challenges with China, problems with Pakistan, clearly, when it comes to a crunch time or a wartime situation, you're left on your own. How do we need to prepare for this now in the future? To deal with the two-front war?
Well, there's no doubt that we have a two-front threat, that is with Pakistan and China to our west and north. And we are preparing for this kind of a scenario. But going forward, I think what we need to pay more attention to is to try and get and maintain a technological edge over our adversaries. Wars in the future are not going to be the traditional wars with armies massed on either side of the border. And therefore, we have to concentrate on quantum technologies, artificial intelligence, machine learning, drone warfare, that is the whole gamut of unmanned systems, and so on and so forth. And that is where we as a country, including the industry, needs to focus on. Hypersonics, I missed out on that one. Manned-unmanned teaming, that is another field that we have to look at. This is where we need to focus in the futuristic technologies which will give us that edge in a future battlefield and not on what is already available in the market today. We need to leapfrog one generation to be ahead of the curve.
Absolutely. Ambassador Swarup, when I would ask you about the India-Russia partnership, we've seen our relationship with Iran almost coming to an end in terms of energy. Is that same thing going to happen with Russia because of sanctions?
Well, when you look at the situation unfolding now with Rosneft and Lukoil having already been sanctioned, you do get a sense of deja vu. Because let's not forget, at one point in time, Iran supplied 12% of our crude. But then Iran oil was completely sanctioned, and then we had to completely give up on Iranian oil. So from 12%, we went down to 0. Now, the same thing, I think, might happen with Russia. because if Rosneft and Lukoil, which are the two major Russian oil producers, which account for 50% of Russian oil output, are going to be sanctioned, I think we have already seen a statement from Reliance Industries that they are going to taper off buying oil from any sanctioned entity by November 21. In fact, it may come down to zero. So if that happens, I think it will be a tragedy, because we have to also factor in Russia is the world's second largest crude producer, and they account for 10% of global oil output. 2 million barrels per day is what India is purchasing. If you take 2 million barrels per day out of the equation, what is going to be the impact on oil prices at the pump? So I think America has to really think about it, but we have to prepare for the day after, that not only have these sanctions kicked in, Senator Lindsey Graham is ready to unveil, the secondary sanctions, which means any country that trades with Russia on oil will be hit with, 100% extra tariffs. So I think given that, these are global compulsions that we have to understand, because we cannot sacrifice our trade with Russia vis-a-vis our trade with the rest of the world. Because, if banks that are channeling the rupee rubles, if they cannot do business with the West, then I think that's going to be very counterproductive.
Okay, my final set of questions. General Naravne, India is working for a 2047 vision. Does the Agniveer scheme really help the forces? Could that threaten our national security? What should be our 2047 military doctrine, and what's the role Agniveer scheme plays there?
The Agnipath scheme is a new scheme unveiled by the government 4 years ago or so. But you see, HR policies the world over keep changing, not only for the militaries, but even in various businesses. And many people are not aware, I'm sure even in this audience would not be aware, that till the mid-70s, there was nothing called a pensionable service. It was introduced only after that, when the minimum qualifying service was made to 15 years and people started getting a pension. At that point of time, there were many people who said that, we will have an aged army. We need young people in the army to fight the wars. So that time there was a counter argument, just as now the argument is, how will you fight with such young boys? So things keep changing. Which policy works or doesn't work, you'll come to know only when it has had time to settle down and get implemented. So let us not rush to any conclusions for and against it, but definitely a young army is the need of the hour. And as we go ahead, we will keep preparing with these boys. And it is not as if the entire army will be less than 4 years service, which is the terms and conditions for the Agniveers. The people who are in the 4th year will go into the 5th year, into the 6th year. So you will always have people and a correct, blend of youth and experience. And I'm sure, and they have performed exceedingly well, the Agniveers, and they recently concluded Op Sindoor. So why are we, as I said, jumping to conclusions? Give it time.
Give it time.
And if there are, requirement of mid-course changes, no policy is perfect the day it is rolled out.
All right.
If mid-course changes are required, they will be done. I'm sure people at the helm are looking into that.
All right. We've completely run out of time. I believe the Maharashtra Chief Minister is entering the premises. I'd like to thank Ambassador Swaroop and General Naravne for joining us, giving us their view on defense and circles of influence for the future. Ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for them.